and welcome to Indianomics. The Ratnagiri Power Plant, earlier Dabhol Power and earlier Enron India, grabbed headlines yet again this week, only to consume more loans from banks and more concessions from governments just to stay afloat. We will begin by narrating briefly the long history of this plant. Thereafter, Mr. BK Batra, Deputy Managing Director of IDBI, the Chief Lending Bank, and Mr. RV Shahi, former Power Secretary who spearheaded the first restructuring of Dabhol, will be joining us. But first, the history.
This was the short-term aspect where central government has provided support through PSDF, state government has provided support through waiver of certain charges, GAIL is providing support through giving gas, pooling it, procuring gas, and has reduced their charges both for LNG processing, regasification and for transporting the gas. All of that they have reduced their charges significantly, and now NTPC will start operating that plant.
Last week, Ratnagiri Gas and Power Private Limited entered its third avatar. It got split into a regasification company and a separate power company. 23 years ago, its first avatar, Dabhol Power Company, was conceived by US gas company Enron as a 1,970 megawatt gas-based power company. GE and Bechtel, two other US companies who were constructing the plant, were minor share owners with 10% equity each. Realizing that gas isn't available in or around India, Enron simultaneously worked with the US, Indian and other governments to lay a gas pipeline from the Middle East through Turkmenistan, Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan to India. But everything that could go wrong went wrong. Environmental protests delayed the plant, political parties wanting bribes blocked and unblocked the plant. Enron and the US government pressured the Indian government. Then Enron went bankrupt. Minority shareholders Bechtel and GE took the Indian government to court. And finally, by 2003 to 2004, India paid off the foreign holders and Dabhol became an Indian plant. In 2005, it entered its next avatar with NTPC and GAIL as its shareholders. Lenders had to pump in a little more money and get some loans converted to equity. But this time, gas became the villain. It became expensive and scarce. Gas available under the administered price was less and KG-D6 gas supplies didn't come as expected. By 2013, accumulated debt and scarce gas brought the plant to a halt. Now under coordination of the Union Power Ministry, the company is to be split into a gas unit and a power company. The turbines and regasification plant will form one company into which banks will pump more money to make it viable. The power unit, which has some gas from the recent auctions, has found a white knight in Indian Railways, which will buy the somewhat uncompetitively priced power. But the question is, if even after 23 years and massive concessions from governments and banks, will the company be viable?
Well, that's a very brief history. Now let me invite Mr. RV Shahi, the former Power Secretary who had spearheaded the restructuring from Enron to the current owners in 2004-2005. And I have with me Mr. BK Batra, the Deputy Managing Director of IDBI Bank, who is the leader of the consortium of banks in charge of restructuring the current loans to Ratnagiri Gas, both the units. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Mr. Batra, first, if you can tell us whether the gas turbine itself is viable as of now, or it will become viable only after the breakwater infrastructure is put in?
Well, right now, the way the scheme is being put in place is that RLNG facilities will be demerged into a separate SPV. They needed additional investment for the capacity to be fully used to 80 cargoes. It cannot be done unless breakwater facilities are there. And in the current dispensation, in the current situation, lenders were finding it difficult to lend additional money for that purpose. So that is one reason why it became necessary to separate it out of the main plant, put it into a separate company, provide it additional money, enable it to go to its full capacity and earn sufficient revenues to service the debt which is going to be allocated to it.
But the owners of the gas turbine remain NTPC and GAIL 51%, the lenders 35% and MSEB the balance?
That is true, and the shareholding pattern of the LNG company will mirror this shareholding pattern. So it will remain the same as of now, but as additional equity required for that capex corresponding to whatever debt we would give gets infused, this may change.
No, I just wanted to know. You were saying
to all the shareholders.
You could not lend money to the. You could not lend extra money to the combined entity. But once the gas turbine goes to a separate entity, you are able to lend money. How does that work? After all, it is the same shareholding.
Shareholding remains the same, but it becomes a new company.
Okay.
With a separate agreement with GAIL, a framework long-term agreement which enables them to use the LNG terminal. It is they who actually will be operating it, importing the LNG cargoes, regasifying it and then selling it off to the market. To the extent it can be used by the power plant located there itself, it is fine, but that may not be adequate. So the balance cargoes, they'll have to sell it to the open market. So it has therefore to be seen as a separate profit center.
Okay.
And
but does it,
lenders then
will
are
it
in
be
a
able
position to look at its viability independently.
Are you convinced that it will be able to service your loans both at the moment and after the infrastructure is put in place?
Yes, we are convinced that after the infrastructure is put in place, it will be able to, but without that it will be difficult.
Okay.
The capacity of the LNG terminal gets greatly constrained because of turbulence in sea and because of breakwater facilities not being there. It can operate only...
Yeah, so at the moment the interest will be capitalized, or do they get a moratorium? What happens to the interest payments until the infrastructure is in place?
Interest for the additional capex only can be capitalized. Otherwise, rest of the interest meter is running and that will need to be serviced. The portion of interest which will not get serviced will become part of the total cost which we are going to finance now. And that total cost will be partly picked up by equity, 50%, and 50% by lenders.
Okay.
In the ratio of their current outstanding debt.
Okay. What about the power plant? Do you expect it to start running very soon? And will it be able to service its debt immediately this year itself?
The situation is somewhat similar with the power plant also, but the good thing is that the power plant has been allocated gas for the next 6 months under the PSDF scheme of Government of India. And therefore, one turbine can be run partly on that basis. Correspondingly, railways have come in as a buyer up to 500 megawatt. They'll pick up this power for their requirements in the state of Maharashtra as also 3 other states. Everything else technically seems to be in place, and therefore once the necessary approvals by Government of Maharashtra and other state governments are in place, then the plant can use that gas, generate power and supply it to them. Okay. Supply it to railways through these state grids.
Okay. So who are the buyers? Railways and the 3 state grids have to carry the power. Is that the way it is envisaged?
That's right. That's right. The purchaser is only railways.
Okay.
But they'll be lifting part of it in Maharashtra and part of it in other 3 states.
And what is the capacity of the plant when it runs initially?
The capacity of one turbine is 660 megawatt, but it is envisaged to go up to 500 megawatt gradually as the requirement gets met.
No, you said it. The capacity of one turbine is 660 megawatts.
That's right, but it can be run at
with the allotted gas. With the allotted gas, how much of the capacity will be used?
With the allotted gas, I think they'll be able to use maybe about 60% of that particular capacity.
Okay. Well, now let me come to you, Mr. Shahi, since you have witnessed a lot of power plants. Is this a viable arrangement for the power plant? Will it be able to service debt for any length of time?
You see, as you know, the cost of LNG became very high. Fortunately, because of the crude price going down, it should be possible to access cheaper LNG, and then it should be possible to have the gas, domestic gas, pooled with LNG with the Government of India scheme to have more gas for this plant. And if the price of power is still higher than what normally state electricity boards would like to buy, or the distribution companies would like to buy at, railway could be a good customer, because railways purchase price today is very, very high in most of the states, because every state has a traction tariff, and traction tariff happens to be the highest. In fact, one of the programs the Railway Minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, has started is to economize on the procurement cost of power to save certain amount, because railway has a budget of the order of 12,000 crores per year on only purchase of power, and in the last budget Mr. Suresh Prabhu said that it is possible to reduce it by at least 2,500 crores.
Okay.
Now that will be possible only if railway is in a position to procure cheaper power from various sources. So while the cost of power in this revised arrangement will still be higher insofar as this Dabhol Power or Ratnagiri Power project is concerned, if the railway is the direct buyer, not necessarily to go through the distribution companies, they can afford a little higher price, because that will be lower than the price at which they are buying power from other
Can
sources.
you tell me the two rates? What is the average power rate at which railways buy, and at what price have they committed to buy Ratnagiri Power?
I think railways are buying power today at rate which varies, but average rate itself is more than 6 rupees, 6.5 rupees. So obviously, if you are able to do something in the range of 5 minus, and then for that, if everybody has to take a hit, one should take, the return could be less, maybe interest could be restructured. If you remember in 2005 when we did the restructuring,
yes,
that time it was possible to procure gas, because unfortunately the gas production, domestic production went down, and simultaneously the crude prices went up.
Yes.
Otherwise, the restructuring that we did in 2005, and I spent almost 6-7 months every week a meeting with lenders,
yes,
with NTPC, with GAIL. None of them were prepared to take. NTPC was not prepared to touch this project, and we convinced lenders also to take a haircut, and others, and equity holders to take a haircut. We gave certain equity to Maharashtra Electricity Board at that time, and the whole thing was satisfactorily resolved, because
I agree, but Mr. Shahi,
this plant got closed in 2000, and we brought it back in 2005-06. So I think that restructuring was on the right track. But I agree with Mr. Batra that if this LNG terminal itself has to be sustainable, then its expansion and breakwater and all these things to be in place, because the appetite for other industries to buy higher cost LNG and gas, regasified from the LNG terminal, is there. Power sector appetite for a higher cost is not there, because you have other options. But other industries could buy gas at higher rates. So if we import LNG and regasify and distribute to other industries, they could buy at higher rate, and in that case it should be possible to have a mix-up price for power sector and to others. It should be possible to make it sustainable.
Let me take a break here. We will be back in a jiffy with lots more questions to Mr. Batra and to Mr. Shahi.